even if you give them a contraceptive, that doesn't change the power differential. That doesn't change the possibility that the woman will be abused because she asks her husband or her partner for money so that the children can pay their school fees. And so it's brought in, just to reduce the number of children, but it doesn't solve some of the problems, and the same problems that that we have had.
They're building brand new communities, and it's being very clearly stated that if you have more than 2 children, you cannot be in the community. You can't be here. So so you're watching a very strong influence of Western thought.
I think a lot of times, they introduce contraception because, they say in part, women don't have power in the relationship, and therefore, they can, this way they won't get pregnant. But, even if you give them a contraceptive, that doesn't change the power differential. That doesn't change the possibility that the woman will be abused because she asks her husband or her partner for money so that the children can pay their school fees. And so it's brought in, just to reduce the number of children, but it doesn't solve some of the problems, and the same problems that that we have had. I think, as I haven't seen it yet because, I think in Uganda, I'm trying to remember, there was less than half of the population is contracepting. So I don't think it has had the same effect on their culture that as it has had on us, where 95% of of the women are on some form of contraceptive. And so, but it's getting there. And again, it's the idea that, you know, you're having too many children. Not that how many children can you support, how many children can you emotionally handle. You need to think about what we call responsible parenthood. It's, if you have more than two, that's too many. Forgetting the fact that many of these women have lost children. I, you know, as a mother, I have 5 kids, as mothers everywhere, we talk when I go there, we talk about it, and I say, yeah, I have my 5 kids, and I tell them my girls and my boys. And every mother I've talked to says, I have this many children, and then gives me the number that died, at least 1 or 2. Malaria kills them, the lack of clean water kills them, and yet we just want them to have fewer children, and not concerned about making sure that these children survive.
And if I could with that as well, is so that the idea understanding is, the mindset of contraception and its use and its in the Western world in relation to the developing world. The one thing is, if you look to Europe, and you realize that the total fertility rate of all of Europe is at 1.5. So when you start realizing that Europe itself is like the United States is at 1.63. You look at China at 1.635. You look at various parts of the world, and you're realizing the rejection that the world is having toward welcoming children, the disdain, as the doctor said, which is true. It's a disdain for family life, a disdain for the beauty of a child and the wonder of a child, and the gifts that a child brings to the family and to society and to all of us. And so what I'm seeing is, with the intrusion of our Western values into the developing world, is the same result. And that is an example would be in parts of the eastern part of Europe, where the imposing of these contraceptive mentality, abortion, and so forth, has fallen. What's happened is that, like in China, when so-called policies change, all right, and even though they haven't changed as drastically as people try to paint them, the reality is families still don't want children. The incentives, that you've seen in parts of Europe, we're going to pay you give you an incentive, a tax write-off, or whatever it's going to be, has not really brought about the change that they thought it would be, because a mentality has crept in. I'm seeing the same thing in Africa, especially in the metro areas, in the major cities, where the universities and the media and the mindset, I give you an example of how this mentality creeps beyond the bedroom. Look at the developing, where development is happening in major cities. They're building buildings that only accommodate a very, very small family. And I give you an example that in parts of Central Europe, and also to Western Europe, and also in Asia, and I'm thinking of a couple of countries in mind, the Philippines, for example, that they're building brand new communities, and it's being very clearly stated that if you have more than 2 children, you cannot be in the community. You can't be here. So so you're watching a very strong influence of Western thought that's now becoming accepted. So I saw a comment from someone about Peru. Latin America, I mean, we're watching the welcoming of children, the numbers of children being brought into families is steadily decreasing. So it's everywhere. And the challenge before us is that we're fighting against, the WHO, you're fighting against the UN and all of its agencies, you're fighting against the foundations that at one time, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kennedy Foundation, and many of these were doing admirable work in education, and they were not so influenced by these ideologies, but now they've been overtaken, their boards are overtaken. And so you see all this money being pushed everywhere. And so the challenge is this is why it's important to do what we're all trying to do, is get underneath the issue and support the family, to support those values, to talk about the consequence of a contraceptive mentality and what does it do to the family, and not to make a child a commodity, not at all, but a child is quote, is a great asset to a family on so many levels. And so, especially in African cultures, in every culture, a child brings gifts and beauty and wonder. But like Dr. Jones says, what we're not considering is the fact that children die from a natural disease, an accident, the lack of health care and so forth. And so when we're encouraging these small families, we're not thinking about how does that impact the local community? How does it impact the local family in its own farm, in its own way of sustenance and subsistence? I mean, there's so many ways that this is influenced. So the reality is that I'm seeing, and that our staff is seeing around the world. And and right now we're sitting in 116 countries. So we're watching this unfold in front of us, that this mentality is so intrusive and it's so corrosive. And so we really have to confront it. And that's what we're trying to do. And I know that's what Dr. Jones and others are doing through, so many of our programs. And so anyone out there that has other skills to bring, please let us know. We'll put you to work.